still going. I'm still here. I'm still strong. Working the waiver wire into week 12. It doesn't stop. I know you think, well, eventually the show is going to go off the air because the fantasy season is almost over and most people are eliminated and there's nothing left on the waiver wire. But no, we're still going. We'll be going until we no longer have air guitar in us. And every day I'm inspired by new rock and roll music, new air guitar for the Waiver Wired show. So as long as there is anything worth anything on the waiver wire and there is any air guitar out there that's inspiring me, I'm going to be going live with you doing the Waiver Wired show. It's my favorite show of the week, always and forever, my favorite show of the week. Even though this particular week doesn't have a lot of options. There's a lot of creative options this week, but not a lot of interface options. Last week, we were every kind of right to tell you to go all in on Ty Chandler because Alexander Mattison, against all odds, played, and Chandler still put up 14 fantasy points because he's explosive for all the reasons we said. Push your chips in. He's still available in something like 55% of leagues. So most of the people tuning into this show have him already, or he's been rostered for most of the season. If you saw him on the waiver wire last week, I'm sure you scooped him. So I doubt he's available, but if he's there, again, 40%. That's the same guidance from last week on Ty Chandler. If he's available, 40%. Then the big question, and I think this is the most difficult second option on the waiver wire we've had all year. Because, please, Zach Charbonnet is not available. I know that technically there are leagues where Zach Charbonnet is available, but I can guarantee everyone in this audience, you go to your player pool, your free agents, and you're not going to find Zach Charbonnet. In the chat, let me know. Tell the audience where we can find these leagues where Zach Charbonnet is available. If he's in your league right now and he's on the waiver wire and he's a free agent, of course you're bidding as much as possible to get him, even though he's a replacement level talent. There's not a big difference, except age, right? There's not a big difference. When Royce Freeman came out of Oregon, he was a very similar player to Zach Charbonnet. Very similar. Like Pac-10, the whole thing. Pac-12, Pac-13, Pac-20, Pac-50, whatever it is. And now we look up, and Royce Freeman is back. Talk about a truther. If anyone was still truthering Royce Freeman, bravo. Bro, this guy is back from the dead for the third time. He was with the Texans at one point. Oh, man. This is a Royce Freeman zombie apocalypse, and he's back at it. Just coming out of the grave, hand shooting up out of the ground, fist. I'm still here. I'm still strong. I'm still Royce Freeman. I was the original Zach Charbonnet. And if Zach Charbonnet is in your league, let us know in the chat. Again, no one yet has volunteered proof of life of a Zach Charbonnet on their waiver wire in their free agent pool. So he's not on my list. We have a report that I submit every Tuesday on Patreon, patreon.com/podfather. That's where you support me, support all our creators. We do all these shows for free. Patreon.com/podfather, and I put out a whole FAAB guidance report. And no, Zach Charbonnet is not on there because I don't believe it. I don't believe it's available in anyone's league that is in our audience. Royce Freeman is, and he dominated the carries in a very close game. Anytime you can dominate all the carries in a close game, you have my attention. You have my attention. So, and he's had weeks recently where he commanded the same target share as Darrell Henderson. Royce Freeman is the RB1. Now, he's in a specialist backfield, right? He's in a shared carry volume, shared touch distribution backfield. But it's 55-45 Royce Freeman. And Rams are not an offense that we're excited about, especially now with Cooper Kupp out. But that's worth at least 15%. That's worth at least 15% of your FAAB. But if anyone needs running back help, Royce Freeman is your answer. Now, on the Starter Stream show, I recommended Darrell Henderson, and he bailed us all out with a touchdown, right? So thank you, Darrell Henderson, because that was the question on the Starter Stream show. Freeman, Henderson. I was like, I got to go Henderson just because he's a little more explosive, I guess. But now that the carry distribution is tilted so far toward Royce Freeman, it's got to be Royce Freeman now. Cheap sunglasses. Difficult to see with cheap sunglasses. Oh, man. And I have 1, 2, 3. I have 4 more. 4 more running backs to talk about, and the wide receivers, and my streamer for this week at quarterback and tight end. And we'll get into it after this. Hey, so many ask me, what's wrong with sports books? Why so many of them fail? The answer is simple. They don't innovate. They're just casino sports books on a phone. That's all they've been. There are a few that are doing a good job. We partner with them. Most of them, not so much. Until Bet Openly came along. Bet Openly said, hey, we're going to innovate. We're going to do something groundbreaking. We're going to have peer-to-peer betting in all states, and you pay 1%. When you win, you pay just 1% on your winnings. You heard that right. It's 1%. With code Underworld, you qualify for just that 1% transaction fee on Bet Openly. It gives you ultimate flexibility to set your own lines and browse lines that others have set. Think about it. That's what betting should be. And now that is the reality. BetOpenly.com. The code is Underworld. Check it out. Zach Chardonnay. That's funny. I like that a lot. That's a great nickname. Zach Chardonnay. That's right. Yes, you can see him. He's where I feel like Kenneth Walker drinks whiskey and Zach Charbonnet drinks white wine. I think that's right. I think we've got that right. I think we have that right. And so Zach Chardonnay is perfect. And again, no one in the chat has seen any Zach Charbonnet on their waiver wire all year. So get out of here. Get out of here with Zach. What? It's not available. Come on. You all should absolutely go check out Bet Openly, especially if you're in one of these states. There's like 20 states left that don't have legal sports betting. Bet Openly is your answer. You should got to go check that out. It's an important promo. Another important promo to talk about is our Black Friday sale. Thanksgiving and Friday of this week, you have the all-in package for the remainder of the season through January 31st. You can get the all-in package for $10. So any of you that have been curious about what the hell is this Dynasty Dominator module, what's actually in the what's in this DFS Dominator package, right? What's in the Dynasty Deluxe package? Are their rankings really that good? And our weekly rankings, I mean, I couldn't believe where we had Saquon Barkley ranked in the weekly projections, top 5 last week. And then sure enough, bang! Right? So you have to see our weekly projections to believe them. And I highly recommend checking out the DFS Dominator and the Dynasty Deluxe. If you haven't checked out the all-in package yet, now is the best opportunity just to preview it. If you're thinking about getting it next year, the code is HOLIDAY. So Thursday, Friday, use code HOLIDAY, and you can get the all-in package for just $10. So that's a special. That's courtesy of Theo Greminger. This was his idea. Promo code is HOLIDAY. Thank you, Theo. He's a smart guy. He knows how to please the people. Leonard Fournette will eventually return. I think Leonard Fournette's he's getting ramped up. He's learning the playbook. They're not in any rush. They know they're a playoff team. They know they want a healthy running back room. And why rush Leonard Fournette into action, into service? I thought it would be last week. It wasn't. But at any point, they could activate Leonard Fournette, and the coach speak is starting to feel like he's a strong candidate for a call-up. That's what we're seeing. That's what we're hearing. I think it's this week with Leonard Fournette. And 2 weeks ago, you had to bid like 15% to get him. Now you could bid 5% because there's Leonard Fournette fatigue. And then just when it's darkest before the dawn, and then Leonard Fournette comes out and you realize, oh, wait, he doesn't have the James Cook fumble problem. A couple weeks ago, James Cook fumbled twice. James Cook hasn't been efficient as a receiver or a runner. Fournette's just better. He's better than Latavius Murray. He has more juice at this point. He's a better all-purpose player, much more size, and a better receiver than James Cook. James Cook still has the explosiveness, but as a runner, I'll give him that. But overall, as an all-purpose back, I like Leonard Fournette in Buffalo. I'm still aggressively pursuing him, hoping he gets dropped. People are just getting tired of waiting. Samaje Perine is a flex option, given that he is the biggest satellite back in the history of the NFL. I mean, he's so big. Remember, at Oklahoma, he was the thunder to Joe Mixon's lightning. That's how big Samaje Perine is. He's at least 230 pounds, and it's just fun to watch him operating in a satellite back role. It's cool. And he's delivering value. He's getting 6 targets some of these games, some of these weeks, 10 fantasy points. He's finding a way to get you 10 fantasy points, Samaje Perine. So you got to pick that guy up. Many of you're just trying to figure out how to manufacture RB2 production. If you're absolutely good with your starting running backs, right? You're very happy. Let's say you drafted, I don't know. Who did we all draft? Let's see. Who did everyone that listens to these shows draft? Oh, that's right. Travis Etienne and Rachaad White. Then you don't need Samaje Perine, right? You're going to be flexing upside wide receivers like a couple of receivers we'll talk about in a minute. In that case, I would prefer to use my 3%. If I'm putting down a little 3% FAAB bid, I would rather put it on Elijah Mitchell. So if you need running back production, then it's got to be Perine. If not, then I think I would have to go with Elijah Mitchell. And here's why. The 49ers running game is just that good. Now, it's Christian McCaffrey, and Christian McCaffrey is an incredible talent. I get it. I get it. I get it. But Christian McCaffrey's good, but he is the RB1 in fantasy football by a truly incredible margin, a margin I've never seen. Christian McCaffrey thus far has 240 fantasy points in PPR leagues. The RB2, it's a tie between Travis Etienne and Raheem Mostert. They're the second highest fantasy scorers at the running back position with 180 fantasy points. It's a 60 fantasy point lead halfway through the season for Christian McCaffrey. Is most of that just how fantastic Christian McCaffrey is in all phases? Yes. But it's also all these touchdowns that the 49ers are scoring is helping to fuel that, which is why I want Elijah Mitchell. You got to stash Elijah Mitchell now. You got to stash Kenny Gainwell now. Kenneth Gainwell, he's down to 27% rostered, and Boston Scott got one more carry than Gainwell did in Monday Night Football. But if DeAndre Swift were to miss time, then the starting running back would be Kenneth Gainwell. Do not forget that. But Gainwell will be dropped in a bunch of leagues in the next day or two. Scoop him up. Scoop that man. This is stash season, and you're stashing Mitchell and Gainwell first and foremost. I'm not giving up on Roschon Johnson, right? Given that Royce Freeman has come back from the dead 7 times in the last 10 years, it's going to be a long time before I get off Roschon Johnson. Roschon Johnson is a better version of Royce Freeman, where Zach Charbonnet is Royce Freeman. Roschon Johnson is just better than those guys in every way. And he was the most efficient Bears running back last week. Same number of touches as Dante Foreman. Much more efficient than Khalil Herbert. It's going to happen. It happened for Jaylen Warren, just like it happened for Jaylen Warren. It's eventually going to happen for Roschon Johnson. He will supplant Khalil Herbert. It will happen. Some other stashes I like now. Chris Rodriguez. Antonio Gibson has a toe injury, so Chris Rodriguez now. The Washington running game is one of the more effective running games in the league. Brian Robinson is a top 5 fantasy back. Let me say it again. I just rewind that. I know. It's hard to believe, right? But it's true. It's true. Brian Robinson. Yes, Brian Robinson is a top 5 fantasy. Yes, it's a top 5 fantasy running back. I mean, I didn't see it. Few people did. But this is a well-architected running game in Washington. And if Brian Robinson, we just have to do this thought experiment across the league. If Brian Robinson misses time, misses games, gets injured, Chris Rodriguez is a deep stash that you're going to be very happy that you dropped whatever wide receiver is not helping you, and you went out and stashed Chris Rodriguez instead. Salvon Ahmed has overtaken Jeff Wilson on the Miami depth chart. Jeff Wilson was a healthy scratch. Ahmed got 3 carries. I don't care that he's not explosive in a vacuum. Neither is Jeff Wilson, but he's a Dolphin. I want a 49er. I want Eagles. I want now Commanders, given what we've seen from Brian Robinson. And I want Dolphins. Pierre Strong got a carry. Pierre Strong is still a worthy stash, even though with Deshaun Watson out for the year, that running game, it does not have the upside that it did. Got the bailout touchdown by Jerome Ford. If he hadn't scored the touchdown, well, it would have been a total dud performance by Jerome Ford. We said bench Jerome Ford, and that was a good process. I mean, bailout touchdown, okay. But then you look at some of the best offenses around the league. A consistent theme, the Texans are one of the top offenses. Just get used to it. And who's behind Devin Singletary? Mike Boone. So go to Player Profiler, look up Mike Boone, check out what his burst score is and his explosiveness. You'll be impressed. Now, he's not the same guy. He's not that guy. When he worked out at the Combine, his pro day, many years ago, he's lost some of that explosiveness, but he's now the guy behind the guy in Houston. And that guy is worth stashing. And after all the controversy last week about me digging in, saying Bigsby is actually the number 2 in Jacksonville. Big debate, who's the number 2 in Jacksonville? I finally relented and admitted it's actually probably D'Ernest Johnston. No, this past week, Bigsby got more carries, but a lot of that was in the fourth quarter in garbage time. Because of the fumbling, the multiple fumbles, with a high fumble rate this year, I'm now digging in, and even though Bigsby proved me right, because it was in garbage time, I still believe D'Ernest Johnson is the number 2 and the running back to stash in Jacksonville. And my air guitar this week was inspired by Boston. A little Boston air guitar there. And I have been inspired this week researching Tom Scholz. Tom Scholz is the band leader of Boston. I had no idea. So just to admit it, I didn't think much of Boston, the band. It's just another 70s rock band. And then I found out that this was one of the bands that inspired the movie Almost Famous, that Cameron Crowe, in writing Almost Famous, it was an amalgam of a bunch of bands that he followed. But the Russell character, the lead guitarist with the mystique, right, who was inspiring jealousy of the lead singer and others in the band, that was mostly based on Tom Scholz, the lead guitarist and the writer and arranger and producer of all of Boston's music. And so I'm like, well, who is this guy? It's always interesting, right? It's always interesting when a lead guitarist is also the guy that writes the songs, that writes the lyrics even, right? It's one thing to write the music and then to have the lead singer come in like Robert Plant and Jimmy Page and write the lyrics, right? Jimmy Page is like, hey, I got this cool, sprawling ballad, right? With all this Celtic flair. Hey, Robert, can you come in and write Stairway to Heaven, please, on top of it? Layer in the lyrics on top, get inspired by the music, and then start writing. And that's a typical band mechanics, how they interact. It's a lot to ask someone to write all the music and all the lyrics and then produce the music. Well, what if I told you that Tom Scholz not only did all that, Tom Scholz also built the recording studio where the music was made. And not only that, he built the gear because he was an engineering major. He was an engineering master's degree. He got a mechanical engineering master's degree from MIT. That's why the reason the band is called Boston is because Tom Scholz was going to MIT to become an engineer. And in becoming an engineer, he was inspired by electrical engineering and circuits, and it made him want to play the guitar. So if there was ever like the intellectual guitar player, it's Tom Scholz is the ultimate intellectual guitar player. So now I have a lot more respect for Boston. And then I go to Tom Scholz's page, the Wikipedia page for Tom Scholz. It reads as follows. Okay, you're not going to just this is amazing, right? This is amazing. So Scholz is an MIT-trained engineer who designed and built his own recording studio in an apartment basement in the early 1970s. Okay. The first Boston album was mostly recorded in his basement studio, primarily using devices he invented. Everyone let that sink in. Me as a podcaster, okay? I'm podcasting on a microphone, right? With cables. And something called a cloud lifter device that helps to amplify my voice, and there's a camera, and there's a computer, and there's an amp. I didn't build any of that with like a soldering kit. This guy is incredible. This is what he invented. Tom Scholz invented the Power Soak, which is a distortion control device. He invented the Rockman, which is a reverb device and controller. And he invented the Sustainer, which is a compression controller and processor. This is gear that recording engineers and musicians, like hundreds, thousands of musicians around the world use. And it's like, well, I wonder where that came from. I wonder who invented this microphone. Like, who did that? It's usually someone working at Polaroid or RCA, Sony, all these places. Tom Scholz worked at Polaroid, and he has patents. He has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 patents for music equipment. So the next time you listen to Boston and it comes on the radio and you're like, I've heard this song a million times, just know that the electric waves that were recorded that end up becoming the music coming out of your speakers were all created by devices that the guitarist invented. It's mind-blowing. I mean, I'm mind-blown by this. And it just makes me want... And now, shockingly, I'm going back and I'm listening to music. Not Amanda. Okay? Not Amanda. All right? And I'm like, oh, wow. This is pretty good. This is pretty good. And Rick Beato did an incredible breakdown of the Boston, their biggest hit. So, yeah, I mean, pretty incredible. Pretty good. So yeah, I think the biggest Boston song, I think it got at something like 90 million views on YouTube that last time I checked. More Than a Feeling, and that's the song that Rick Beato breaks down. And so when you're watching Almost Famous, and they're like, hey man, we're just one of the Out of Focus guys, right? And that's what they're talking about. They're like, you're getting all the credit. They're writing all the articles, right, in Cream Magazine and Rolling Stone. It came out that he invented all this stuff and he was doing all of these albums on his own equipment. And of course, rock writers are going to write about this guy and give him all the attention, even though he didn't want the attention. Like when they were setting up the lighting for the shows, he's not in the spotlight. There's another guitarist and the singer, who is a phenomenal singer, right? Their lead singer is phenomenal. And he's in the background. He's always in the shadows. You barely even see him. Right? So that's just, who knew? I didn't know any of this. But yeah, the Rick Beato channel on YouTube is incredible. And I think if you were going to start to listen to that channel, that would be the first video I would watch is the breakdown of the Boston More Than a Feeling. I think that was his best video. Absolute best video because he shows you how Tom Scholz does a pick drag, and there's a bunch of effects in that first Boston record that end up showing up all over the 80s. Like the 80s rockers basically grabbed a bunch of the techniques from that first Boston record and applied it to, Whitesnake, Motley Crue, Bon Jovi, using a lot of those techniques. So it's interesting. He also invented a bunch of techniques as well as, because again, he's an engineer. And he's figuring out how to, and this is, rock and roll's like 20 years old at that point. And so a lot of this stuff hadn't been invented because it's brand new. Incredible. Tom Scholz, what a guy. What a guy. And so if we're going to air guitar at the beginning of the show, once in a while, we're not only going to research who's available on the waiver wire, but we're also going to research how the hell these songs got made. Who the hell's behind the actual guitarists? And we're going to focus on the guitarists, not the out-of-focus guys. We're just an out-of-focus guy in the band. The t-shirt is everything, man. The t-shirt is everything. That movie, man. Philip Seymour Hoffman's in that movie. God, almost famous. There are Gen Zers in this audience, sadly. Everyone, moment of silence for the Gen Zers in this audience that have not listened to Almost Famous. It's truly sad. They have not seen it. They have not watched it. And they should. And they will never, but they should. I think we can all agree with that. One of the best movies of all time. Khalil Shakir is now a popular waiver wire ad, right on schedule. You have to understand my delight. Now, of course, I'm riding a cloud of righteousness about Quentin Johnston's failure. And I had my day. Y'all gave me my day yesterday. Thank you for the day. Now I'm now empathizing with him, and I feel bad for him now. So it's also distracting me, which is maybe, I think, celebrating a negative outcome for a player that you happen to predict can distract you away from the positive outcomes that you predicted. Like when I look up and I see that the top ads, according to the analysts around fantasy football, are Khalil Shakir and Jaden Reed. And I'm like, really? That's funny. It's almost like everyone in this audience already has those guys. And there was no way we were dropping them, even with a dud performance from Khalil Shakir. I said, do not drop him. In fact, scoop him. You know he's going to be dropped, so pick him up. If you picked him up and started him, then, bravo. Right? Jaden Reed. We said, glad you didn't give up on him. He's the best wide receiver on the Packers. And as it turns out, week in, week out, he's the best receiver on the Packers. And if they're still available, go ahead and put your 5%, your max wide receiver bid on those guys. Jaden Reed's now getting multiple carries per game. I'd just as soon give the ball to Jaden Reed out of the backfield as Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones looking dust. I mean, Aaron Jones' fall has been steep the last couple of years. I mean, he has almost no dynasty value left. Just like that, poof. Right? Guys turn 27, poof. Austin Eckler, he's out there with a piano on his back, poof. Tutu Atwell. Tutu Atwell is a guy to pick up and play. Why? Cooper Kupp's going poof. Is Tutu Atwell an impressive player? Is he like Jaden Reed, Khalil Shakir, even Michael Wilson? No. He's just a pure target conservation play. We know this guy is going to start. We know he has deep speed. We know that the Rams, all else equal, they'll be losing. So Tutu Atwell is the next priority. So for most of us, Atwell is actually the top priority because, of course, we already have Shakir and we already have Reed. Odell Beckham is another target conservation play because Mark Andrews is out for the year, sadly. And then Beckham performs well. You're not going to get him, though. This is not an offense you want to be all in on. And Zay Flowers is still the best wide receiver on this team. And Isaiah Likely is going to come in and command a lot of those Mark Andrews targets. So it's not a windfall of targets, a target windfall for Odell Beckham. So I'm not so excited about Odell. Other people will have Odell higher on their priority list this week. I'd rather have Tutu Atwell, for example. And I'd rather have Michael Wilson. When Michael Wilson happens, he's going to hit harder than Odell Beckham. He's going to be back at some point. He had the setback with the shoulder. He might even be out this week. Well, then I'm picking him up next week. This is one of those guys. Every week, pick up Michael Wilson, just like every week it was stash Shakir, pick up Jaden Reed. And a lot of, hey, Demario Douglas is available. They had a bye week. It got dropped. Why do you care about Demario Douglas? This is not an offense that I want exposure to. So we're going to be one of the few services that doesn't have a Demario Douglas in our top 5 ads this week. Like Jalen Guyton. Jalen Guyton actually has upside. Jalen Guyton would have squeezed that football. He was out with a groin injury last week. He's probably going to be back this week. He practiced on a limited basis last Friday. He's probably back. And if you're the Chargers coaches, you're like, we're going to play Guyton. He at least is going to squeeze that goddamn football. And so there's real upside with Jalen Guyton. There's more upside now with Darnell Mooney. I like stashing Darnell Mooney. Just had the one catch, but Darnell Mooney can have spike weeks with Justin Fields. So I like Darnell Mooney in these deeper leagues where you have 2-3 flex positions, at least 3 wide receivers starting positions. In those particular league formats, Darnell Mooney becomes an interesting guy to play if it's a shootout game environment, and there's a lot higher probability that any given game environment is going to be a shootout when Justin Fields is back there, putting up points. The Bears play the Vikings on Monday Night Football. I'm going to be streaming a little bit of Darnell Mooney this week. I just said it. And I'm still stashing A.T. Perry. You got to still keep stashing A.T. Perry. You're stashing Rondale Moore. Rondale Moore's just a stash. I know some people are eager to pick him up. Michael Wilson's going to be back soon. Dontavian Wicks? No, man. No. Dontavian Wicks had a week. He's going to go right back in the box. These are just guys you stash. I know Bateman's in this category. Curtis Samuel's now in this category. Marvin Mims. There needs to be injuries ahead of these guys. Trey Palmer. There is an injury, right, to Chris Godwin. So Trey Palmer is actually more interesting than these other guys because if Godwin doesn't play, then Palmer becomes interesting in deep, deep leagues. So I would actually prioritize as a stash Trey Palmer and A.T. Perry over these other guys. And my quarterback streamer this week, Gardner Minshew. Gardner Minshew, always Gardner Minshew. He's got Jones. He's got Pittman. They're going to be playing from behind because it's just not that great of a team, even though they're home to the Buccaneers. So this isn't actually a great Gardner Minshew week. Mayfield is streamable. Mayfield's not available in a lot of leagues, though. I think that this game, the total is 43.5. It could shoot out. This game could absolutely shoot out. Neither secondary is any good, but you've got Mike Evans. Think about the receivers. Maybe Godwin plays, maybe he doesn't. But if Godwin doesn't play, then you have more snaps and routes for a guy that runs a 4.3 in Trey Palmer. Mike Evans is a Hall of Famer. You've got Michael Pittman, one of the most consistent alpha receivers in the league. You got Josh Downs, one of the most productive rookie wide receivers. Alec Pierce has deep speed. This game could shoot out in Lucas Oil Stadium. So if, of course, you're prioritizing Mayfield as a streamer, if Mayfield's not available for that reason, Minshew. Buccaneers still have a good but not great run defense, so they will be able to bottle up Jonathan Taylor to a degree. That'll force Gardner Minshew to throw more. So I like targeting that game with my quarterback streaming. Mayfield, if not Mayfield, then Minshew. And then, of course, at the tight end position, we mentioned him earlier, Isaiah Likely. I'm going all in on Isaiah Likely. If I need tight end help at all, going a full 10% of my budget, if not more. Isaiah Likely, now get this. This is hard to believe. Isaiah Likely has averaged, this is true, look it up. Isaiah Likely has averaged, get this, 19 fantasy points per game in games that he has started, where Mark Andrews did not play and Isaiah Likely started. 19 fantasy points per game. Go get that guy.